Good morning, everyone. My name is Olga Tavanova, and I want to thank everybody for joining us with Ukrainian Media Center Ukrinform. We're in today 254 of the full-scale aggression of the Russian aggressor in our land, and I want to thank everybody who tells the truth to the world about this war. In brief, our schedule for today at 12 o'clock, we will have Oleksandr Krasavitsky joining us, the director of Follow Publish House, and we'll talk about the publishing industry since the beginning of the Russia's full-scale invasion. At 13:30, we will have Mykola Povoroznik joining us, his first deputy head of Kyiv City State Administration, and we'll talk about the situation in the capital. And joining us now is Oleksandr Senkevych, Mayor of Mykolaiv. Hello, Mr. Oleksandr. Good morning. Good morning. Mr. Oleksandr, how did the last day pass in Mykolaiv? Today, in the night, Mykolaiv was shelled around 2030. The C-300 rockets destroyed one of the storage facilities. In another facility, there was a fire erupted, and the emergency service personnel put out the fire, and one of the administrative buildings was also damaged, along with the cars parked nearby. No injured, no dead, thankfully. As of today, the Russia's rockets killed 149 persons in total, out of which 2 children, and with a lot of heavily injured. Still, the city of Mykolaiv functions under the conditions of energy-saving measures. We practice rolling power shutdowns, replace electric transport with buses. We ask the businesses to switch off the lights, mostly to save the lights that they can save. Everybody tries to tune in and save power. Mr. Oleksandr, what's the situation with the internally relocated persons in Mykolaiv? How much internally relocated people are in Mykolaiv now, and what are the issues with them? We don't have a lot of internally relocated people in Mykolaiv. They're being taken care of by city-state administrations, but about those who remain in Mykolaiv, it's about 300 of them. We set up the bulletin for them, places to take meals. They are the inhabitants of the villages which are closer to the front lines in the gray zone. The majority of the people coming to Mykolaiv who come to Mykolaiv to stay and get themselves protected from the war, they proceed further on to the north or west. And Mykolaiv has not been shelled only for 44 days out of 254 days of war. People are being shelled, they feel themselves under threat, and they try to move further from Mykolaiv. Now it's around 220, 230,000 people still in Mykolaiv. They come back to pick up some winter clothing and go back to the safer areas. Mr. Oleksandr, I can't help asking you about the destruction of the Soviet-era monuments. There are 2 cases about which we know. Can you please give us some comment on that? And maybe there are some authorities' solution to start this process in the civilized way, to remove these monuments in a civilized way. Yes, recently unknown persons destroyed 2 monuments with explosive device. My opinion is that there are enough explosions caused by Russian rockets, and any explosions in the city are should not something that should not be happening. And the explosions destroy the dwellings of our citizens, break the windows, doors in the nearby houses. We don't know who did it. We're waiting for some information from our law enforcement agencies, their opinions. I don't want to blame or accuse anybody. It can be either inhabitants, citizens of Mykolaiv, or also some Russian provocators. So we are waiting for the opinion of the law enforcement agencies. I think it's a provocation, but all the citizens, all the inhabitants of Mykolaiv are now united, and we are ready to resist the enemy. So if those are some local activists, it's not something clever that they're doing, because the last monument destroyed yesterday in the night, it was in burial site where about 80 people are buried who perished during the World War II. It was not a monument to Soviet regime. It was a monument on the burial site. However, in any case, we're waiting for the opinion of the law enforcement agencies that we can comment on. Mr. Oleksandr, we understand that there is a request from the society as to the mitigation of the consequences of totalitarianism and Russification, that there are some measures taking place around the country in whole. Is there any program with the local authorities in Mykolaiv? Well, all the monuments that were recommended during mass decommunization in 2015, 2016 for removal, they were removed back then, or maybe a little bit later. Some monuments had some remnants of Soviet regimes, Lenin portraits or red stars or something like that. In any case, it should be implemented on the level of the country, and some mechanisms should be in place of the level of the country. We renamed the Moskovska Street into Mariupolska. It's one of the central streets in Mykolaiv, and other streets were renamed way back before the full-scale invasion. There was a committee established who was taking care of the renaming the streets and returning the historic names of the streets. Some of the streets received new names. In any case, we understand who is the enemy now, who is our friend, and we shouldn't have some hothead approach to renaming of the streets that we will have to rename again after the war, not to create the tension in the society. So I think that the resolution should be taken on the government level, central government level. Mr. Oleksandr, recently there was a cooperation memorandum signed between Mykolaiv and Bebek. Yes, during the war we signed partnership relations with Hanover in Germany, and there is a sister city. If one city has a sister city in Ukraine, there can be no, it shouldn't have another sister city in Ukraine. But we express some solidarity, and this small town is ready to help us. They gather resources and they channel them to Ukraine. They will specifically work with Mykolaiv, and today Mykolaiv, well, there has huge demand that for the services that not everybody even understands. It's not enough power. We feel it in Mykolaiv for a long time. There is no potable water in Mykolaiv. People gather potable water with plastic bottles. That's why we establish any partnership relations with great joy. We signed these agreements online, and we're happy to have people abroad who don't cease to support Ukraine. They don't get tired. They don't say, oh, Ukraine, we're fed up with Ukrainians' problems, but they keep sending cars, keep sending vehicles for utility services, special transport tools, and the most of the help is given by the government of Denmark currently, that they help us in preparation to the heating season, and just in simple covering the windows, they send us a lot of wood to cover the windows broken by the shellings. So we covered about 70% of all the windows broken due to the shellings. I want to thank all our international partners who sent their teams to us. I applied to the Association of the Cities of Ukraine. We got teams from Ivano-Frankivsk, Odessa, Zhytomyr, Slavutich, from Chernivtsi, Rivne, from all over Ukraine. People come to help us to prepare for the heating season, to just provide heating to all the apartment blocks and even to those apartments which don't have people at the moment. Dear colleagues, your questions, please. Good morning, Ukrinform. Can you please tell us what are the profits of the budget, of the municipal budget, while business is not coming back to the city and while the city is under constant challenge, and are those funds enough to cover the city's needs? You are absolutely right. We don't have big businesses working in the city. There are no companies, not even middle-sized business. We have only micro business and small business working in the city, and just a retail area. There are utility services, utility facilities working in the city who cover the needs of the critical infrastructure. The resolution 590 prohibits any capital expenditures, so we don't have a lot of expenditure for the time being, so that the funds we get from the budgets are enough to cover the basic needs of the city without additional subventions. But today we live mostly thanks to military personnel. Mykolaiv was mostly militarized city in Ukraine before the war. By the number of brigades located in Mykolaiv, our city was the biggest in Ukraine, and we're getting funds from the military personnel, from the military units located in the city. It helps us to help the army, to support the army, and the people who work in the city today, they get wages from those funds. As to the other expenditures, if we have huge problems with water pipes, because there is salt water running through them, the number of emergency cases increased 20 times. So now Mykolaiv is like a small Venice, and there is water everywhere, and our emergency services work with mitigating this damage. Obviously today, to mitigate the consequences of these emergency cases, we receive money from state budget, and we expect some funds to replace the pipelines next year. Dear colleagues, do you have any more questions?
Hi, I have to ask in English. I know it's not such an important issue at the moment, but I've been in Mykolaiv 2 days ago, and I noticed there's a lot of animals that were left behind from people that had to left the city. Is there something being done in that topic, or what's the city's response to that?
Yes, indeed, a lot of domestic animals were left by the people in the city. Today, our center of pets protection takes care of this issue, and unfortunately there's not enough space to, man, to keep all those pets. Now we cooperate with the shelters abroad, and they help us to transport these pets abroad. But in any case, we keep them in a humane way. The pets are being sterilized and let out at the places where they were catched. Unfortunately, this is the policy we have to adhere to now. Mr. Oleksandr, maybe some help by the volunteer organizations is necessary in this regard. Maybe if it's necessary, can you please word it? Yes, our Mykolaiv volunteers, they are very proactive, and they have there is a huge movement of different organizations taking care of this issue. So they mostly take those, they bring those pets out of the city and find new families for those pets. They try to talk to the citizens of Mykolaiv to adopt those pets, but I have to remind those who live that they are responsible for their pets as for their kids. They shouldn't just leave them behind in the street to just run around. Recently we had a meeting where the pets were disseminated among the new families, and we continue our work in this regard, and the volunteers taking care of this, they can tell about this issue to the whole world and get help from elsewhere. Thank you, Mr. Oleksandr. Thank you for finding time to join our air. Dear friends, our next briefing is at 12 o'clock. I will remind you, we will talk with Oleksandr Krasovsky, director of Folio Publishing House. We'll talk about the publishing industry in Ukraine during the war. We believe in our armed forces and keep working for the victory together. Glory to Ukraine.